I have ridden every borderland road in Veldrath at least twice. I know where the passes ice over in early autumn, which valley floors turn to marsh before the spring thaw, and which waymarkers the old cartographers placed wrong by nearly a full day's ride. I know the mountain roads the way I know the weight of the ring seal on my finger, by long use, by a certain weariness, by the understanding that some things in a kingdom must be personally tended, or they are not tended at all. The Veldrath survey had been postponed for 11 years. My father never finished it. My council assumed I would send a clerk. I sent myself, alone, on a gray morning in the third week of autumn, with my rank insignia in my saddlebag and a plain traveler's cloak on my back, because a borderland survey done by a man who announces himself is a survey of performances, not of truths. I wanted to know what was actually out there, what bloodlines still moved through the high passes, which valleys had settled into informal pack law without my knowledge, which old first moon waymarkers remained standing, and whether the oldest rumor in the territorial archives had any root in reality. The rumor was this, that somewhere in the easternmost borderland beyond the last marked pass, there was a valley that appeared on no map, tended by no pack, claimed by no lord, and that something old lived in it. Not dangerous, the archive note said, in the careful handwriting of a clerk who had clearly never gone to look. Not dangerous, simply old. I had read that note 14 times over 11 years. I am not a man given to chasing rumors, but that particular one had never let me alone. I crossed the last mapped pass on the 5th day. My horse, Kale, a gray stallion of 10 years who had crossed every difficult road I'd ever ridden, and had never once complained about any of them, picked his footing carefully on the stone trail that descended toward the unmapped valley below. The black pines on either side were enormous, older than any tree I had seen in the lowlands, their bark the color of iron in winter light. No territorial markers, no pack boundaries scratched into the stone. No scent of organized wolf claim anywhere on the wind, only silence. And below through the trees, the faint silver glint of a stream. Kale went down on the switchback. It was not dramatic. A loose stone, a wrong angle, and his right foreleg folded beneath him on the icy trail. He recovered immediately, caught himself, stood, but I saw the hitch in his step before he took 3 strides, and I dismounted without a word and stood in the cold with my hand on his neck and assessed the damage. Not broken. Strained and badly. He could not be ridden. Not tonight, and perhaps not for 2 days. I was standing in an unmapped valley, incognito, with a lame horse, an hour before dark. I said nothing useful. I simply stood there, hand on Kale's neck, watching the pines, and thought about the particular kind of irony that finds a king when he least wants it. "The tendon," said a voice. I did not reach for the blade at my hip. I have survived enough ambushes to know the difference between a person who intends harm and a person who simply appeared without announcing herself, and this was the latter. The voice was quiet, unhurried, and came from slightly above me on the slope, which meant she had been there before I arrived and had chosen, for her own reasons, to say nothing until now. I turned. She was standing at the tree line, perhaps 4 arm lengths away. She was not young, or rather, she carried the particular quality that very old things sometimes carry, which is not age in the way a weathered face is aged, but something subtler, something that sat in the stillness of how she moved and the directness of her gaze. She wore plain wool, dark in color, with a short traveling cloak that had been mended in 3 places. No pack mark on her collar, no territorial insignia anywhere I could see. She was looking at Kale, not at me. "The tendon just above the fetlock," she said. "Not torn, strained. He'll need 2 days of rest and cold poultice before you put weight on him again." "You can see that from there," I said. She looked at me then briefly, and whatever she read in my face apparently satisfied or bored her in equal measure, because she simply walked toward the horse and crouched beside his foreleg without asking my permission. I let her. She worked with her hands in a way I had rarely seen, not the quick, practiced efficiency of a trained healer working to a method, but something slower and more fundamental, as though she was simply listening to the damage through her palms and letting it tell her what it needed. Kale, who did not accept strangers easily, stood absolutely still. His ears, which had been forward and suspicious when she approached, dropped into an ease that I associated with him only at the end of a long journey when he finally reached a stable he trusted. She worked for a long time without speaking. I did not interrupt. When she stood, she said, "There is shelter further down the valley, a stone building. You can stable him there for the night." "Yours," I said. "The valley's," she said. And she walked down the trail without looking back to see if I followed. I followed. The stone building was, in fact, 3 buildings, a large one and 2 smaller ones, arranged around a courtyard that had been cleared of pine needles with more regularity than I would have expected from a single occupant, if a single occupant was what this was. The stone itself was old, very old. The foundation lines were pre-kingdom. I knew the architectural period from the survey archives, from the records of structures built in Veldrath before the pack system consolidated, which put the construction at no less than 400 years ago. She settled Kale in the stable with the ease of someone who had done this 10,000 times for 10,000 different horses, speaking nothing to him, just moving her hands over his neck and down, and he allowed it with a trust that made me feel, obscurely, that I was watching something that had nothing to do with horsemanship. She built a fire in the main building. She did not ask who I was, where I came from, or what business a lone rider had in a valley that appeared on no territorial map. She set water to heat and gathered supplies, dried herbs, a length of clean linen, a shallow clay basin with the methodical quiet of a person who has spent most of her life solving practical problems alone. I sat where she gestured on a low stool near the hearth and watched. "You live here alone," I said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. "How long?" She looked at me across the fire. There was no irritation in it, no sense of a private person being pushed, only an assessment. "A long time," she said. "The buildings are pre-kingdom," I said. "Yes," she said. "The earliest pack consolidation records in Veldrath date to approximately 400 years ago," I said. "Before that, the eastern borderlands were held under a different law. The first moon territorial system." She was wrapping Kale's poultice in the linen, her hands moving steadily. "You know the archive records," she said. "Read them. Then you know that the first moon bloodlines were not required to register under pack law," she said. "They predated it. The consolidation treaties left them to their own territorial decisions." "Technically correct," I said, "though in practice most of them registered within a generation." "Most of them," she said. She carried the poultice into the stable, applied it, secured it, and came back to the fire. She poured water into 2 clay cups and set one in front of me. It smelled of something I couldn't identify, not medicinal, not sweet, simply ancient, like water that had come from a spring that fed something very deep. I drank it. It was very good. "I am conducting the Eastern Borderland Survey for the Kingdom of Veldrath," I said. "I am required to record all territorial claims and bloodlines in the unmapped regions." "I know what a borderland survey is," she said. "Then you know I'm required to record yours." She looked at the fire for a moment. Not evasively, simply with the patience of someone deciding how much of a conversation they are willing to have tonight. "My bloodline is not unregistered," she said at last. "It predates registration. There is a difference. The current survey law doesn't distinguish between those categories," I said. "The current survey law was written 300 years after the treaties that define my category," she said. "There is also a difference." I looked at her. In the firelight, the quality I had noticed on the trail was more visible, that strange stillness, that sense of accumulated time. Her hands, resting on her knees, were the hands of a woman in perhaps her middle years. Her eyes were something else entirely. "How old are you?" I said. The question sat between us for a moment. "Old enough," she said, "to have watched several kingdoms come and go, and to have found that most of them want the same 3 things from the people in their borderlands: tribute, soldiers, and the comfort of knowing that everything in their territory has been named and logged and made orderly." She looked at me directly. "I don't offer any of those." "What do you offer?" I said. "A place to stable a lame horse," she said, "and 2 days' worth of patience until the tendon heals." I should have pressed. It was my errand. The survey log on my saddlebag required names, bloodlines, territorial claims. It required precisely the information she was declining to give, stated with the pleasant immovability of a mountain that has been asked, very politely, to move, and has no objection to the request and no intention of complying. But the fire was warm. Kale was settled. And there was something in the air of this valley, not magic, nothing I could have described to my counsel without sounding like I had gone simple on the mountain road, that made urgency feel very far away. 2 days, I said. 2 days, she agreed. She set a bowl of food in front of me, something with lentils and dried root vegetables, plain and filling, and went back to tending the fire. I ate. I did not press. I slept better than I had slept in 3 years. I woke before dawn out of habit and went to the doorway and looked out at the valley in the dark. The black pines were enormous in the pre-light, and between them, faint as breath, the first moon waymarkers were visible, tall standing stones carved with spirals, older than the pack system, older than the kingdom, older perhaps than the war that had consolidated both. There were 7 of them that I could see, each one tended no lichen, no tumbled stones at the base, no growth reclaiming the carved channels. Someone had been maintaining them for 400 years. I heard her behind me, not footsteps exactly, just a change in the air of the doorway, and I did not turn. The waymarkers, I said. You tend them. Someone has to, she said. The first moon waymarkers were the territorial boundary system before pack law. They defined the limits of each bloodline's sovereign range. I paused. They haven't had legal standing for 300 years. They have had standing for 400, she said. 300 years of law written by one pack system does not unmake 400 years of something older. I turned then. She was standing just inside the doorway, already dressed for the cold, watching the valley with an expression I could not fully read, not nostalgia, not grief, something quieter than both. The look of someone watching a place they are responsible for. What do they mark? I said. The waymarkers. What territory? She was quiet for a moment. This valley, she said. And the 3 passes that approach it. The same territory they have always marked. And you hold that territory. I tend it, she said. There is a difference between holding and tending. I let that sit. Below us in the valley, the pines were beginning to catch the first gray light, and the stream was audible now, a steady, low sound that had been there all night, and that I had been hearing without registering, like a voice in a language you haven't spoken since childhood. The wolves came out of the trees at dawn. There were 11 of them, large, dark-coated, the mountain variety that my foresters had not formally recorded in the eastern borderlands for at least 60 years, because the survey had not reached this far. They came to the edge of the courtyard and sat, in a loose half-circle, watching the building with the relaxed attention of animals who had done this every morning for a very long time. Senara. She had told me her name over the evening meal, offered without ceremony, the way she offered everything, without elaboration or invitation for follow-up, went to the woodpile beside the building, and came back with her hands full of something she scattered in the courtyard. Dried meat, by the smell. The wolves came forward without any haste and took what they found and sat again, not wild, not tame, something between which is actually more ancient than either. They're pack-bond wolves, I said quietly. No, she said. They are simply wolves who choose to be here. There is a distinction. The pack-bond is a political arrangement, she said. What wolves do of their own choosing is something else. One of them, the largest, a dark gray male who moved with the deliberate authority of an animal who had been doing exactly what he wanted for his entire life, came past the others and sat beside Senara, not at her feet in the way of a trained dog. Beside her in the way of an equal who has decided to be near someone for reasons that are his own business. My wolf, somewhere in my chest, went very still. I had had that feeling perhaps 3 times in my life, twice before battles that I hadn't understood were significant until I was in them, and once when I first held my father's ring seal after his death and understood, for the first time, what I had been given. It was not prescience. It was not a vision. It was simply a sudden absolute certainty that something had just become very important. I stood in the pre-dawn cold of an unmapped valley and watched a gray wolf choose to sit beside a woman who had lived here for 400 years, and my wolf in my chest said, "Pay attention." I spent the second day walking the valley. Ostensibly, I was recording the survey. I took notes, the stands of black pine, the stream course, the elevation markers, the condition of the waymarkers, the approximate range of the wolf pack. I noted the stone building's construction period and their orientation relative to the first moon markers. I noted the single occupant and described her without a name, in the cautious language surveyors use when they're not certain they have legal authority over what they're recording. In practice, I was paying attention. Senara moved through the valley the way water moves through a channel it has followed for centuries. Not because it is compelled to, but because the channel fits, because the path is worn into the stone by long use, and the water has simply become the shape of the place it runs through. She checked the waymarkers. She walked the upper edge of the tree line, noting something about the condition of the pines that I could not read from where I was, but that she recorded in her own way, a slight adjustment of her path, a hand on bark, a pause. She knew this valley the way I know the Veldrath Court roads, by feel in the dark without consulting a map. I caught up to her at the stream mid-morning. "You patrol it," I said. "I tend it," she said again. "Every day, most days." I looked at the waymarker nearest us, a tall spiral-carved stone, well-maintained, the carving as crisp as if it had been cut recently. "The first moon territorial system required constant tending," I said. "The waymarkers weren't ornamental, they were functional. They had to be kept to maintain the territorial claim." "Yes," she said, "you have been maintaining a territorial claim, a first moon territorial claim for 400 years, I said. "I have been tending a valley," she said. "What the law calls it is secondary to what it is." "What is it?" She looked at the stream for a moment. "A place where nothing is hunted that doesn't need to be," she said. "A place where old things are kept in good repair. A place that exists whether or not anyone maps it." I said nothing. I turned the ring seal on my finger, an old habit, a way of thinking, and looked at the valley and considered the very particular impossibility of it. A single woman, 4 centuries old, maintaining a pre-kingdom territorial system by herself, keeping 11 wolves in uncollected ease, tending stone buildings that predated the current law by more lifetimes than my own bloodline could count. "Why?" I said. She turned to look at me. Not sharply, simply with the kind of attention she gave everything which was complete without being intrusive. "Why what? Why stay? The first moon bloodlines who registered under pack law were offered territorial protections, pack rights, kingdom resources. You declined all of that. You've been here alone for 4 centuries. Why?" She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I thought she might not answer at all. "Because when I left once," she said at last, "the valley was not here when I returned. The waymarkers were broken, the wolves were gone, the stream had silted over." She looked at the water. "It took 80 years to restore." "When was that?" 311 years ago, she said. I did not ask what had called her away. Whatever it was, she had come back, and she had spent 80 years repairing what her absence had cost, and she had not left since. We walked back in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who are doing their thinking out loud at the same time and know it. At the edge of the courtyard, she checked Kale's poultice with the same steady thoroughness she had used the night before, and announced that he would be sound enough to travel by morning. "One more night," she said. "One more night," I agreed. I did not, that evening, press the survey. I asked her instead about the waymarkers, what the first moon territorial system had been, how it had functioned, what the carved spirals meant in the original notation. She answered precisely, without embellishment, with the patience of someone who has long since given up being surprised that other people don't know things that seem, to her, entirely obvious. I listened, and I thought about the archive note. Not dangerous, simply old. By the time the fire burned low, I had revised my understanding considerably. She was not simply old. She was the last custodian of a system of land law that the rest of the kingdom had replaced without fully understanding what it had replaced. and she had kept it alive in a single valley for 4 centuries, alone, at the cost of everything most people would have considered a life. I turned the ring seal on my finger. It was warm. It was always warm near an open fire. I did not think much of it. Morning came clear and cold, with a sharp frost that turned the courtyard stones silver and made the black pines very dark against a pale sky. I rose early again out of habit and found Senara already in the courtyard, checking the waymarker at its eastern edge, the tallest one, the spiral deepest cut, the stone the color of charcoal. I went to check Kale. He was well, better than well, the hitch in his step entirely gone, moving in his stall with the easy authority of a horse who knows he is sound, and is pleased about it. I saddled him slowly, in the unhurried way of a man who is not certain he wants to finish this task, and then I stood with the survey log in my hand and the ring seal on my finger and thought about what I was going to write. Valley not previously mapped. Pre-kingdom construction present, well maintained. First moon waymarkers standing, maintained to functional standard. Single occupant, bloodline undetermined, unregistered by choice. Territorial claim, first moon system, functionally continuous for approximately 400 years. Under kingdom law, I had 3 options: require registration, apply the unregistered bloodline provision, or designate the valley as a protected first moon site under the preservation statutes that no one had invoked in living memory, because there was nothing left to invoke them for. I was still standing there with the survey log when she came in from the courtyard. She looked at the log. She looked at me, she said nothing. I have to write something, I said. I know, she said, the options available to me. I know the options, she said. I read the consolidation treaties, I know the survey statutes. I've had 11 years to consider what would happen when the Veldrath survey reached this valley. And, I said, she looked at Kale, who was watching her with the calm approval of a horse who has decided someone is trustworthy. And I've been trying to determine, she said, whether the man conducting this survey is capable of understanding the difference between what a law requires and what a situation is. That, I said, depends on the situation. The situation, she said, is that this valley has been kept for 400 years by a bloodline that predates your kingdom's law, in a territorial system that your kingdom's law superseded but did not abolish, because the consolidation treaties left first moon claims to self-determination. I am not in violation of anything. I am simply inconvenient to categorize. Inconvenient, I said. Most old things are, she said. I looked at the ring seal, still warm, warmer perhaps than it had been, though that might have been my hand, which was not cold, which was not, in fact, anything but steady, which was simply a king's hand on an old survey log in a stone stable in the borderlands, turning a ring that had been in his family since the founding. Come and show me the eastern waymarker, I said. The tall one. I want to record the carving correctly. She looked at me for a moment, that complete, unhurried attention, and then she turned and walked toward the courtyard. I followed. The waymarker was impressive up close. I had seen the first moon carvings in the archive illustrations, but the illustrations were copies of copies, and what the stone itself held was different, not just older but denser, carrying the weight of the intention that had cut it. The spiral was not decorative. It was a notation, a claim and a covenant made in stone, which was the only medium the first moon bloodlines had trusted to outlast the people who made it. I stood beside it with my survey log and began to note the dimensions, the condition, the carving depth. Senara stood at my left, slightly back, watching the valley. I was reaching across to measure the upper section of the spiral when Kale, who had followed us out of the stable with the easy freedom of a horse who has decided he likes a place, moved forward and put his nose against Senara's shoulder. She put her hand up automatically to steady him, the flat of her palm against his jaw, the way she had in the stable, and he leaned into it. And I was watching this, and I was also reaching for the ring seal with my other hand. Out of the old habit of turning it when I was thinking, her hand and my hand arrived at Kale's neck at the same moment. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand. It was not dramatic. It was the lightest possible contact, the side of her smallest finger against my knuckle, for perhaps the duration of 2 heartbeats before she drew back. The ring seal on my finger ignited. There is no other word for it. The ring had been in my family since the founding of Veldrath, a plain iron band, set with a flat seal face carved with the first moon spiral of the founding bloodline, worn by every king since the beginning and warm in normal use, and never, in any record I had ever read, anything more than that. It became something more than that. The light was silver. Not firelight, not candlelight, something colder and older and far more absolute. The way starlight on new snow has a quality that no other light achieves. It came from the seal face, and it went, steady and certain, into the air, and the carved spiral on the waymarker beside me caught it and threw it back. And I was standing in the courtyard of an unmapped valley with my survey log in one hand and my other hand burning with silver light. And I understood, in the same moment, and with the same absolute clarity that I had understood very few things in my life, that I had not come here on a survey errand. I had come here because I was supposed to come here. Because the ring seal had been waiting 400 years to find what I had just in the most accidental possible way found. I looked at my hand on her wrist. She had drawn back, but not far. A mark was rising. Not a wound, not a burn. A spiral, the same spiral as the one on the ring seal, forming in silver on the inside of her wrist as I watched, the way frost forms on glass in cold weather. Deliberate, complete, entirely unhurried. She was looking at it. She was very still. "Senara," I said. "I know what it is," she said. Her voice was completely level. 4 centuries of practice at being level. "I know what it means." "Do you?" I said. Because I was not certain I did entirely, and I had been carrying the thing it meant my entire life. She looked at the wrist. She looked at the waymarker, which was still holding the silver light, which was still moving between the seal and the stone in the quiet exchange of something that had been deferred for a very long time. She looked at me. "The founding bloodline of Veldrath," she said, "made the first moon compact with 11 territorial families before the pact system existed. The compact was sealed with bond marks, one in the founding bloodline's ring seal, one in each of the 11 families' lines. The marks were meant to bind the compact permanently. 9 of the 11 families eventually registered under pact law and the compact became treaty law. 2 did not." She paused. "One of those 2 was my family. The other was mine," I said. "Yes," she said. "The ring seal has been in my family since the founding," I said. "My father had it and his father before him and every king of Veldrath before that back to the beginning. It has always been described as the kingdom's founding seal, nothing more. It was always more than that," she said. "It was the mark of the compact. It was waiting. For 400 years," I said. "For whoever the compact would recognize," she said. "The compact was a bond mark, not a ceremony. It recognized on its own terms in its own time. I was told when I was young that I would know it when it happened." She looked at the spiral on her wrist. "I believed it less and less as the centuries went on. I turned the ring seal in the silver light. The spiral on the seal face matched the mark on her wrist exactly, which of course it did, which of course it had always been going to, which was the kind of thing that made a man understand that the machinery of destiny was very old and did not require his participation to function, only his attention when the moment arrived. "I'm going to ask you something," I said, "and I want you to understand that your answer determines nothing about how I record this valley, this territory, or your presence in it. The compact is already recognized. It cannot be unrecognized. The survey record will reflect the truth of what this place is. What I'm asking is personal." She looked at me. "Ask," she said. "You have been here for 400 years, I said. "Alone, tending this valley because your family's compact required it and because you left once and came back to damage, and because you have not found a reason strong enough to leave again." "Yes," she said. "Would you consider," I said carefully, "that the compact being recognized might change the calculus?" It was the least eloquent sentence I had uttered in my adult life. I was aware of this. I was also not particularly interested in eloquence at this exact moment. Senara looked at me for a long time. The silver light from the waymarker was fading now, returning to stone, the way light always eventually returns to what contains it, and in its going the valley came back in its ordinary colors, the black pines and the pale sky and the frost on the stones. The compact recognizes a bond, she said, not an obligation. I know, I said. The bond is not a summons, she said. It is not an order, it is not a survey requirement. I know, I said. I have spent 400 years, she said very quietly, not being ordered or summoned or required. I know that too, I said. She looked at the mark on her wrist for a long moment. Then she looked up at the valley she had tended for 4 centuries, the waymarkers and the pines and the stream and the wolves who lived here because they chose to. I would need, she said, for the valley to remain as it is, unmapped in the public records, the waymarkers maintained, the wolves left to their own choices. Done, I said. I would need, she said, to be able to return here when I needed to. Of course, I said. I would need, she said, and she paused, and this was, I thought, the real one, for no one to tell me what to do. I haven't tried that yet, I said. I have a reasonable success rate with most things. I was not planning to begin with that. She looked at me. And she almost smiled, not quite, not yet, but the quality at the edges of her expression was something in that direction, something that 4 centuries of careful solitude had not entirely extinguished. 2 days, she said. You've been here 2 days. 3, I said, counting from the morning I arrived. You know nothing about me. I know you can diagnose a horse's tendon injury from 4 arm lengths in failing light, I said. I know you've maintained a pre-kingdom territorial system alone for 400 years. I know the wolves trust you in the way that matters, which is without being asked to. And I know the ring seal has been warm on my hand since the moment I came down into this valley, and that I thought for 2 days it was the fire. She was quiet. Not asking you to leave, I said. I'm asking whether there is a version of this, of whatever this is, compact and bond mark and 4 centuries of waiting, in which you are not alone anymore. Not because the ring seal requires it, because I am asking. The valley was very still. The wolves were somewhere in the trees. I could hear the occasional shift and settle of them, comfortable, unhurried. Cale was standing at the waymarker's base with the placid patience of a horse who has decided that wherever his rider is taking his time, he can take his time also. Senara looked at her wrist. The spiral mark was silver and clean and precise, the same mark that the ring seal carried, and it was not going away. The survey record, she said. What will you write? I opened the log to the relevant page. I will write that the valley in the eastern borderland is a first moon-protected site, maintained in continuous accordance with the founding compact. Territorial claim, acknowledged and standing. Bloodline, first moon founding compact recognized. Guardian, Senara of the Eastern Valley, compact holder and sovereign of this territory by right of 400 years of unbroken stewardship. I paused. And then, I said, I will add a notation in the king's hand that the compact has been formally recognized by the Veldrath ring seal, and that the sovereign of this territory has the protection and the full standing of the kingdom, under the founding compact which predates the current law but which the current law is bound to honor. I looked at her. No requirement to register, no pack affiliation, no tribute, no soldiers, no orders, and the valley remains exactly as it is. She looked at the survey log. She looked at the waymarker. She looked at the spiral on her wrist, which was the same spiral that my ring seal carried, which had been waiting 400 years for this morning. You came here on a survey errand, she said. Yes, I said, and you rode alone. I always ride alone when I want to know the truth of something, I said. That, she said after a moment, is either very sensible or very foolish. It has been both at different times, I said. This time I think it was sensible. She looked at the valley once more, the full long look of someone who has spent centuries learning every angle of a place and is now, for the first time in a very long time, considering the possibility that the place is large enough to share. The Eastern Pass, she said. The waymarker at its head needs recarving. The frost has been working at it for 60 years and the spiral is beginning to lose depth. I can send a stonemason, I said. I would rather do it myself, she said. but someone to hold the scaffold in the upper section would be useful. I looked at her. Are you asking me to hold your scaffold? I am observing, she said, that it would be useful. It was not by any accounting the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. It was also, I found, exactly sufficient. I can hold a scaffold, I said. Good, she said. We spent the rest of the morning at the waymarker at the valley's head, she working the chisel along the faded spiral, restoring depth to what the frost had softened, and I holding the scaffold's upper brace against the wind that came down off the pass. It was cold, methodical work, requiring no conversation. We were both, I think, grateful for the task. It gave us somewhere to put our attention while everything else settled into its new shape around us. At midday, I wrote the survey notation. I wrote it in full as I had described, the first moon-protected designation, the compact recognition, the kingdom protection under Senara's name, the explicit notation that the territorial claim was sovereign and standing. I pressed the ring seal into the wax at the bottom of the page, and the seal face in the wax showed the spiral clean and true. She looked at it for a long moment. Is it what you wanted? I said. I did not want anything, she said. I had stopped wanting things a long time ago, and now she was quiet for the space of several breaths. Now, she said carefully, I am considering the possibility that I stopped too early. I left the next morning. I had a survey to complete, and a kingdom that would, in my absence, produce exactly the quantity of manageable crisis that kingdoms always produce. And Senara's valley, however much it invited the temptation to stay, was not going to be well served by a king who abandoned his responsibilities to hold scaffold indefinitely. She walked with me to the upper pass. Cale was sound, better than sound, moving with an easy confidence that suggested 2 days of rest and good care had done him no harm at all. The frost had lifted and the morning was pale gold through the black pines, and the waymarkers stood in the clear light with their spirals readable and true. At the pass, she stopped. I have not left this valley, she said, in 311 years. I know, I said. When you complete the survey, she said, and you return to Veldrath, what will you say to your council about the eastern borderlands? I will tell them, I said, that the First Moon Compact is recognized, that the Eastern Valley has a designated sovereign, and that the survey is complete. I looked at her. I will not tell them everything I found. Some surveys are more informative in their summary than in their detail. The corner of her mouth moved, that almost smile, which I was beginning to recognize as the closest she came to full expression. You are surprisingly diplomatic, she said, for a man who rides alone into unmapped territory without announcing himself. I have found, I said, that most things worth finding are found by people who don't announce themselves. She looked at me steadily. In the morning light, the mark on her wrist was visible, not glowing, simply present, silver against her skin, permanent and clean. Come back in the spring, she said. The upper pass is impassable in deep winter, but by the first thaw the road is sound. I'll come in the spring, I said, and perhaps the spring after that, she said. As many springs as you'll have me, I said. She said nothing to that, but she did not look away. I rode up the pass, and at the top I turned, and she was still standing at the tree line, watching, not waving, not gesturing, simply there in the way that old things are there, as though the mountain itself had arranged her in that spot for the purpose of being seen by exactly one person looking back. I turned Cale toward the lowlands and the kingdom and the survey's remaining roads. I thought about her for the rest of the survey. This was not efficient, and I was aware of it, and I did it anyway. I thought about the way she had walked the valley, that unhurried thoroughness, that sense of complete possession not as ownership but as responsibility. I thought about the 11 wolves, who chose to be near her without being asked. I thought about Cale, who had allowed her to tend his injury with a trust that I had never seen him extend to anyone he had not known for years. I thought about the ring seal, which had been warm since the moment I descended into the valley, and which I had, with the self-confident foolishness of a man who believes he knows what he knows, attributed to the fire. I thought, most of all, about the expression on her face when she had said, I had stopped wanting things a long time ago, and what it had meant, the carefulness with which she had then said, "I am considering the possibility that I stopped too early. The survey took 3 more weeks. I completed it precisely, recorded everything that was there to be recorded, and wrote the official summation for my council with the care of a man who knows exactly which details belong in a public record, and which belong in the private understanding of a king who was sent to find out what was in his borderlands, and found considerably more than he'd intended." The council accepted the summary without significant question. The Eastern Valley was designated a first moon-protected site. Senara's name appeared, for the first time in any kingdom record, as its guardian and compact holder. The clerks, who are accustomed to the occasional archaic provision surfacing in a borderland survey, noted the unusual designation, filed it correctly, and moved on. I returned to Veldrath in the first week of winter, and I began counting toward spring. I rode back into the valley on the 3rd day after the first thaw. She was at the waymarker at the valley's head, not, this time, with a chisel, but simply standing with her hand on the stone in the way she sometimes stood with her hand on the bark of the old pines, listening to what they had to report. She heard Kale on the pass road and turned, and I was close enough by then to see her face clearly. She was not surprised. She had said come back in the spring, and I had come back in the spring, and she was a woman who had spent 400 years discovering that the world behaved exactly as badly as she expected it to. I had apparently revised that expectation in some small way. I dismounted at the pass head and led Kale down to the courtyard, and she fell in beside me without being asked, and we walked in the comfortable silence of people who have established that they can be in the same place without the compulsion to fill it. "The waymarkers," I said. "The east one is done," she said. "The north one still needs attention. The frost has been at it." "I'll hold the scaffold," I said. "I know," she said. "The wolves came out of the pines at the edge of the courtyard, all 11 of them, and one new one, smaller and lighter coated, who I had not seen before and who sat at Senara's feet with the proprietary ease of an animal who has decided that this particular spot belongs to it." "New," I said. "She found the valley last autumn," Senara said. "I don't know where she came from. She decided to stay." The small wolf looked at me with the direct, unapologetic assessment of all wild things deciding about strangers, and then apparently decided I was satisfactory and looked away. I looked at Senara. "Things find this valley," I said. "The things that are meant to," she said. She went ahead into the building to set water for the horse, and I stood in the courtyard in the thin spring light with my ring seal warm on my finger, and the new wolf sitting at my feet now, warm against my boot, without any introduction or any invitation, simply because she had decided the spot was where she wanted to be. I had ridden out in the autumn to conduct a survey of what was in my kingdom's borderlands. I had found 400 years of patience, and 11 wolves, and a waymarker at the head of a valley that appeared on no map, and a woman who had kept everything she was responsible for in good repair since before my bloodline had been a kingdom, who had stopped wanting things so long ago that she had forgotten the wanting was something she had a right to, and who had said, with the careful precision of someone measuring the weight of a word before she trusted it to the air, "Come back in the spring." I had come back in the spring. And in the spring after that I would come back again. She had asked nothing of me. She had asked nothing of any king for 400 years. She had simply tended what she was responsible for, in a valley that existed whether or not it was mapped, with a patience that made my own seem like a beginning. I would learn from that patience. I had been learning from it since the moment Kale went down on the switchback and she walked out of the trees and told me, without ceremony, exactly what the problem was and how long it would take to fix. The ring seal was warm on my finger. It had, I now understood, always been warm. I had simply not been paying attention. I went in out of the cold, into the valley that had no name on any map but hers, and closed the door behind me against the last of the winter. And for the first time in many years I was entirely certain I was exactly where I was supposed to be.